The numbers are going to make you angry. Not because they are hard to believe, but because they are impossible to ignore. In the 1970s, an average American family could buy a house, raise children, and build a life on a single income. Today, two incomes barely cover rent. Something changed, and the math tells the whole story. This was a time when a young couple could walk into a bank, put down a modest payment, and walk out with the keys to their first home. A factory job paid enough for a house, a car, summer vacations, and retirement savings. The American dream was not a slogan, but a realistic expectation. The 1970s had their problems. Inflation was rising. Gas lines stretched around blocks, but the fundamental equation of American life still worked. Hard work plus time equaled stability. Let's walk through exactly what things cost during that decade. The specific prices, the real wages, the math that made the simple life possible. Some of this might bring back memories. Some of it might explain why everything feels so different now. Let's step into that world. The median home price in America in 1970 was $23,400. By 1979, it had risen to around $62,900 as inflation pushed prices up throughout the decade. These numbers sound almost fictional today. A house for less than what some people now spend on a car. But these were real prices for real homes. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a garage, a neighborhood where kids could ride bikes until the streetlights came on. The median household income in 1970 was approximately $9,870. By the end of the decade, it was around $16,500. Here is where the math gets interesting. In 1970, the average home cost roughly 2.4 times the median annual income. A family could realistically save for a down payment in a few years and afford monthly mortgage payments without both parents working full-time. Mortgage interest rates were higher than today, typically between 7% and 9% for most of the decade, spiking toward the end. But even with those rates, the absolute cost of housing remained within reach. A $25,000 mortgage at 8% over 30 years meant monthly payments around $183. That same family earning $800 a month could manage that payment and still have money left over. Rent told a similar story. The average monthly rent for an apartment in 1970 was around $108. By 1979, it had climbed to roughly $200. A young person starting out could afford their own place on an entry-level salary. Living independently did not require roommates, side hustles, or parental support well into adulthood. Cars in the 1970s were large, inefficient, and remarkably affordable. A brand new Ford Pinto in 1971 started around $1,850. The Chevrolet Impala, a full-size family sedan, cost approximately $3,500. Even the muscle cars that defined the era, the Camaros and Mustangs, were within reach for working-class buyers at around $3,000 to $4,000. Gas prices at the start of the decade hovered around 36 cents per gallon. Then came the 1973 oil crisis, and everything changed. Prices jumped to over 50 cents, eventually reaching around 86 cents by 1979. Americans who had built their entire lives around cheap gas suddenly faced lines at stations and rationing in some areas. The crisis felt catastrophic at the time. Looking back, 86 cents per gallon sounds like a dream. Insurance, registration, and maintenance added to car costs. But the total remained manageable. A family could own 2 cars without financial strain. Teenagers could buy their first car with summer job savings. The used car lot offered freedom for a few $100s. Before we continue with the everyday costs that shaped American life in this era, if you're enjoying this look back at how people really lived and want to explore more decades and places, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about how Americans built the life we know today. Groceries in the 1970s took a smaller bite out of family budgets. A gallon of milk cost around 65 cents at the start of the decade, rising to about $1.20 by 1979. A loaf of bread was roughly 24 cents, climbing to around 50 cents. A dozen eggs cost 60 cents. Ground beef ran about 70 cents per pound. The weekly grocery trip for a family of 4 might total $30 to $40 in 1970. By the end of the decade, inflation pushed that to $60 or $70. These increases felt significant at the time. Housewives clipped coupons more carefully. Families ate out less frequently. But the fundamental ability to feed a family on a single income remained intact. Dining out was a treat, not a necessity born from exhaustion. A family dinner at a sit-down restaurant might cost $15 to $20 for 4 people. Fast food was even cheaper. A McDonald's hamburger cost around 20 cents at the start of the decade. A Big Mac was 65 cents. Taking the kids to McDonald's was a special occasion that did not require financial calculation. Education costs tell perhaps the most dramatic story of change. Tuition at a public university in 1970 averaged around $400 per year. Private universities charged approximately $1,800 per year. Room and board added to costs, but a student could realistically work a summer job and part-time during the school year to pay for college without loans. The idea of graduating with $50,000 or $100,000 in debt would have seemed absurd. A year at Harvard in 1970 cost around $4,000 total, including tuition, room, and board. Elite education was expensive relative to other options, but it remained possible for middle-class families to send their children without mortgaging their futures. Healthcare operated differently in the 1970s. Employer-provided insurance was common, and out-of-pocket costs remained affordable. A doctor's visit might cost $15 to $25. A hospital stay, even for something significant, rarely bankrupted families. Medical debt as a leading cause of financial ruin was not yet the American reality. Health insurance premiums, when paid directly, averaged a few $100s per year for family coverage. The system had problems, particularly for those without employer coverage, but the fear of financial devastation from illness was not the constant presence it would become. Entertainment and leisure fit comfortably into budgets in the 1970s. Movie tickets cost around $1.50 to $2. A family of 4 could see a film, buy popcorn and drinks, and spend less than $15 for a night out. The multiplex was emerging, offering choices that felt abundant. A color television, still a significant purchase, cost between $400 and $500 for a quality set. This was expensive, perhaps a month's wages, but families saved for it and expected the television to last a decade or more. Appliances were built to be repaired, not replaced. A gallon of paint cost around $7. Lumber for home projects was affordable enough that we can do it yourself. Projects were practical, not aspirational. Men built additions onto their homes, finished basements, and constructed backyard sheds without taking out loans. Summer vacations meant loading the station wagon and driving to national parks, beaches, or grandma's house. Motel rooms along the highway cost $15 to $25 per night. A family could take a 2-week road trip for a few $100s total. These vacations created lasting memories without creating debt. The minimum wage in 1970 was $1.60 per hour. By 1979, it had risen to $2.90 per hour. These wages could support more than they suggest. A minimum wage worker in 1970, working full-time, earned about $3,300 annually. This was not comfortable, but it was survivable. Rent, food, and basic necessities remained within reach even at the bottom of the wage scale. Factory workers, union members, and skilled tradespeople earned considerably more. A steel worker or auto worker could earn $15,000 to $20,000 annually with overtime. This was solidly middle class, enough for home ownership, new cars, family vacations, and college savings for the children. The single-income household was not just possible, but common. Roughly 60% of married women with children under 18 did not work outside the home. One paycheck supported the entire family, not because wages were so high, but because the cost of the basics had not yet outpaced what working people earned. The 1970s were not perfect. Inflation eroded purchasing power year after year. The decade ended with prices roughly double what they had been at the start. Unemployment rose. The energy crisis disrupted daily life. Racial and gender inequalities meant these costs and opportunities were not equally available to all Americans, but the fundamental math of middle-class life still worked. A family could reasonably expect that hard work would lead to stability. Children could do better than their parents. The simple life, a home, a car, a family, security, was achievable without extraordinary luck or privilege. What changed is complex. Wages stopped keeping pace with productivity. Housing became an investment vehicle rather than simply shelter. Healthcare and education costs exploded beyond inflation. The social contract that connected work to security frayed, and in many places broke entirely. For those who lived through the 1970s, these prices are not just numbers. They represent a different relationship between work and life, a time when the simple things, a house, a family, a sense of security, were simple to achieve. Not easy, but possible. The numbers from that decade do not just shock. They reveal how much the equation of American life has changed and raise questions about whether it can ever balance again. For those with memories of this era, there is always more history to explore.